welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, broadcast out of beautiful Monticello, Maine, in Aroostook County. And we also are heard on IPMNation.org every Saturday afternoon at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is a New Hampshire-based online talk radio show. And also TuneIn.com. You go to TuneIn.com, you put in WBCQ, and you can hear all the programs live as they're being broadcast on the station, not necessarily live. And we do put up most of our radio shows on Camp Constitution's YouTube channel, so visit the YouTube channel, and please subscribe to the channel. It's hosted, this show is sponsored by CampConstitution.net, which, among other things, runs a week and a day-long family camp. And this year it will run in Rindge, New Hampshire at the Toanipi Christian Retreat Center from July 2nd to the 9th. And we have a great lineup of speakers. Unfortunately, one of our featured speakers, our most favorite, KrisAnne Hall, is not able to make it, but she's on here on the line now. KrisAnne, how are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Great to talk to you, Hal.
Good. Well, same here.
I'm still so very excited about your Constitution camp because it is just an amazing experience for the kids. My son is a huge fan, and it comes wholeheartly recommended.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, this would have been your fourth year, so usually if you come back the second time, it's something someone likes it. But as you probably know, we're expanding. I became full time, thanks to the generosity of many camp supporters and a little bit of
congratulations.
A little bit of faith. Well, thank you. A little bit of faith. I'd say a lot of faith.
I was going to say a lot of faith.
Yeah, because as you know, you're doing this full time, and God has blessed you. I don't know if I want to travel as extensively as you. My wife will put my face in a milk carton, you know. I used to do a lot of traveling like that, and I used to kid people. I'd say, when I see my face in a milk carton, it must be time to come home. But so
right.
But we have one of the classes you were going to teach, and that's what I like to have our show, was founding mothers. And I remember you and I we took a trip to the State House, a field trip to the Massachusetts State House. It was last year, 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. And there was a long line of people getting through security, and I said, well, let me take you to see where James Otis is buried. And we went down to the old Granary Burial Ground where there's some John Hancock, Paul Revere's parents, who else? Robert Treat Payne, Sam Adams, and there was a lady
we saw the graveyard. We saw the graveyard with Crispus Attucks.
Crispus Attucks, yes, that's right.
Yeah, that was very exciting.
That's correct, yeah. And the lady there, sort of what they call an interpreter. She was dressed in colonial outfit, and she. I think we asked where was Mercy Warren Otis buried, and the woman said, well, they didn't really care about the women, and you let her know in real certain terms that the women played a very significant role. And if I'm not mistaken, was it you mentioned this at camp one year? I think it was Lord Cornwallis. And maybe you could quote him directly, but something about once they take care of the men, they still have the women to contend with.
Yeah,
was he the one
he was involved in that event. The British troops had just won a victory over the American troops, and a British soldier came up to Cornwallis, and they were all kind of happy and celebrating. And the British soldier said to Cornwallis, he said, We may eliminate the American men, but we'll have all we can do to control the women. And
That's
it was
right.
The women were such an important and intricate part of who our American forces were. I mean, they couldn't do what they did without the women, and it wasn't just the women staying home and doing laundry and feeding the kids. They were fighters, and they were involved in the battles. And by the time that General Cornwallis had gotten that news, the women were not only on the battlefield with the men, but they were also engaging in a economic and political war. So by the time General Cornwallis had gotten that news, the American women in this battle for liberty had almost completely decimated the English linen industry.
I remember when we took a trip to the Lexington Green last year. They had mentioned that it was a week before the Battle of Lexington Concord, how the women were just totally committed to the cause and not just knitting things, but they're putting their lives on the line. And there's a few ladies. Now, if I was to ask you, what, in your opinion, what woman stands out more than the rest as far as one of the top leaders of the movement?
Well, I would have to say there are two, but for two different reasons. For me, number one is Mercy Otis Warren. She captured my heart from the very beginning. She was self-taught, but you know how back then everybody was self-taught.
That's right.
And she was the first American woman playwright. And she wrote Shakespearean-style plays in the form of satire, poking fun at the British government. Her plays were put on all over the colonies and gaining support for the liberty movement. She was also the first American woman historian who wrote a 3-volume set about the revolutionary process called The Rise, Progress, and Termination of the American Revolution. And she said she wrote this book. She said, I have to write this book because I lived it. And she was not just a writer, but she was a confidant. She was pen pals with John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and her husband, Dr. James Warren and Samuel Adams. These men came to her for advice. And it's amazing to read the letters that they shared with each other.
By the way, you motivated me to actually buy the book and read it.
Yes.
And here's a lady. This isn't someone writing it 200 years later, but this was a firsthand experience, which is usually one of the best sources. It also motivated me to do a little historical trip, and I found where she's buried and Berry Hill in Plymouth, and I did a little video. I put a little video clip together on our Camp Constitution site. And I actually I found a desk that she owned, her house in Plymouth, which is a restaurant there now, and then went down to the courthouse in Barnstable where there's a statue of her and her brother and the Historical Society. And I said, is her house still standing? He said, no, but here's the banister from the house. And so I pulled the banister up. Yeah. I don't know how they had the banister left. But she also wrote a tract. Initially, she was not in favor of the Constitution. And she wrote a tract on the subject, and it is available. And I think there were a number of people, and it barely passed in Massachusetts because they were concerned that they would give too much power to the central government. But I think eventually they thought it was a worthy thing. But she did have some initial misgivings. Yeah,
well, she wrote that book with such candor that she ended up making John Adams very angry about the book. John Adams John Adams wrote her a very scathing letter after he read that book, which I think makes the value of it even greater because somebody's apt to say, you can't read a book written by a woman back in that day. It would be so biased and so skewed and you wouldn't get the truth. But the truth of the matter is, it is the best original source text in one place that you can get for all that piece of history. And she didn't write it, glorifying so many people. She wrote it as she saw it.
Well, that's what Cromwell said. Paint me warts and all, right? Not just what we want to hear, but everything. So who was the other woman that you believe was one of the most significant ladies in our founding era?
Her name is Penelope Barker, and she pulled, just 10 months after the Sons of Liberty, pulled the men together for the protest against the East India Trading Company tea. She pulled the women together in Edenton, North Carolina, in the home of Elizabeth King, and she really organized the women to become a part of the political and economic movement. She is the organizer that would eventually be the reason that the soldier came to Cornwallis and said that, because it was because of Penelope Barker that the women stopped purchasing all the English mandated goods. And she organized the women to travel throughout the colonies and teach each other how to make linen out of flaxen and wool, and how to make tea out of sassafras and raspberry, because one of the big contentions that the colonists had at that time was that the British government was mandating that they purchase the English-made linen and the English-made goods. And these women got together and signed a petition and said, we are not going to purchase any English-made goods until the laws that have enslaved our people are repealed. And they not only signed this petition, but they sent it on to the British government, which is really huge, because they were acting in treason. They were saying, we are going to disobey the law, and here is our name. Wow. Well, when they sent their first and their last names, they also were sending the names of the men in their family. And the interesting little bit of historical trivia is that as soon as the Parliament got those names, they realized that a majority of the women on that list shared the names of men who were English merchants. And so these women, not only pledging to break the law, but pledging to purchase no English-made goods, were sending over the names of men who were English merchants, which means those men would not keep their jobs, and they would be charged with treason too.
Wow, incredible. I know that in New England we have our share of a very famous lady, well, maybe not so well known, but I'm trying to get the word out. And one of them is the first female militia led by Prudence Wright in Pepperell, Massachusetts. And
she
today,
is one of my favorites. Actually, Hal, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I actually got to hold Prudence Wright's musket.
By the way, where is that? Because Janet told me that you did that, and I thought, where is that being kept?
The man's name escapes me right now, but he does, and he travels and teaches and does. He's a pastor, and he travels and teaches and does an amazing presentation on the restoration of the Black Robe Regiment. He is actually someone, Hal, that you should look into having visit your Constitution camp, because he would be an amazing addition. He's got a great program, and he's a pastor, and he does it like I do, because we love those people, we love that time, and we have a passion for liberty. And I got to go and sit through his presentation, and I actually taught after him. So we got to meet each other, and it was a really great meeting. His first name is Dan, but I can't remember right off the top of my head. I don't know. I can probably look it up here real quick.
Yeah, I'd be very interested. Well, I first found out about Prudence when, traveling up in that. It's in Pepperell's about 50 miles north and east of Boston, north and west of Boston. And it's right on the New Hampshire border, right near Nashville. Actually, that's probably about 40 miles, 35 miles out of Boston. And there's a covered bridge, and I've been a covered bridge aficionado. There was not a covered bridge there in 1775.
Right.
When she stopped, there was a wooden bridge there. She stopped a British patrol, and all the men had answered the alarm and were involved in the Battle of Bunker Hill, or most of the men. And she stopped a patrol, and initially the men, they thought, these are local militiamen. They figured these are a bunch of women. They kind of laughed. What are we worried about? And one of the members of this band, these British army, was a Tory, and it would happen to be the brother of Prudence. And he says something like, "Well, my sister says, drop or she'll shoot. She'll shoot." And they captured some very vital information that I don't remember all the details, but if they hadn't done this, it would have been quite harmful to the efforts of the colonists. And she eventually got a Go ahead. She eventually got. I think she was the first one to actually get a pension from the federal government. I don't know if it was called federal government in those days, for her services. the first female to get it to be recognized as a veteran.
Yeah, I teach about her in the Founding Mothers class. She's just amazing. I'm trying to find the poem that was written by one of her
granddaughter, maybe?
Granddaughter, yeah, that's an amazing poem because she actually, it was her brother-in-law that noticed that it was Prudence guarding the bridge.
Oh, the
and
brother,
when
okay, yeah.
Yeah, when he found out that it was, because he recognized her voice, and when he recognized her voice, he refused to go forward. And the poem is pretty interesting because the other soldier that was with him refused to retreat, Captain Leonard Whiting. And Samuel Cummings, which was Prudence, well, I guess it's Prudence's brother, he said, history says that he says, I recognized Prue's voice, and she would wade through blood for the rebel cause. And so he fled, and the story says that he never was seen by their family again.
Really?
But he never showed his face to the family again, and they did capture that the other Tory traitor who had he had the information in his boot, and they turned it over to the American troops. But the guy who does the Black Robe Regiment, his name is Pastor Dan Fisher.
Dan Fisher, okay.
Yes, yeah, and it's Fisher, and he's amazing. If you just put in your search engine Pastor Dan Fisher bringing back Black Robe Regiment, you'll come up with a WordPress.com website. We'll actually have a video clip of the presentation that he makes. He actually dresses in period appropriate wear and narrates a story as if he were one of the members of the Black Robe Regiment.
Of course, Garrett Lear is also one of the Black Robe Regiment folks. He's been to camp a number of times. In fact, I'm speaking to his Sons of the American Revolution in New Hampshire. He's become the state president, so I'll see him Saturday. He's the one that we had him in downtown Boston at a flag raising the Gadsden flag a few years ago, and he's 6'7", and he's in his outfit, and he's got a firing musket. But nobody bothered walking around downtown Boston with a musket. But nobody bothered him. I don't think I'd bother anybody who was 6'7" with a musket. I think I'd better leave him alone.
You should, yeah. But their muskets were huge. I mean, you should see me holding Prudence's musket. It's practically bigger than I am. Well, I found that poem. You want to hear about it? Oh,
certainly, please. Yes, yeah.
Okay, it says, now this is about Prudence Wright's brother recognizing that it was Prudence that was guarding the bridge. The poem says, not one further step I ride, one who rode with Whiting cried, 'tis my sister Prue, alas, she would never let me pass, save when her dead body fell, I turned back from Pepperell. You see, and that's why that made me angry when we were together, Hal, and the lady said, well, they didn't really care that much about the women. The bravery and the victory that these women gave our liberty movement is being actively denied.
By the people, by the feminists who should be extolling these people, the virtues of these great ladies. Yeah.
I mean, Mercy Otis Warren is the first American playwright, the first American woman historian. I mean, she wrote a 3-volume history book, and we, the very women who are supposed to be empowering our daughters, don't even want to recognize that she existed.
It doesn't fit. They have to have this perpetual victim mentality, and that doesn't fit the narrative. It's just like there were a lot of great black patriots of the Revolution who gave their lives, and I was in a Facebook debate with this 50-year-old retired policeman, black man, who's I guess sounds like a black nationalist, and he just sort of completely disavowing it was just about greed. And I'm thinking all these black patriots who were wounded on Lexington Battle Green, that fought at Bunker Hill, that were almost every major battle.
Brandywine, Germantown, it's crazy.
Yeah. And
I think that you should send them to my website, Hal, and read the several articles that I have about the patriots of color and how the Constitution ended slavery, how the revolution's one of the main motivations of the revolution was to gather independence from Great Britain so they could end slavery. We don't teach in our history books, Hal, that it was Great Britain that was mandating slavery on the American colonies. We had Virginia was actively trying to end the slave trade in Virginia, but Great Britain actually threatened Virginia when it was a colony, not just with economic sanctions, but with military force if they ever stopped the slave trade.
Now, I think Virginia was the first state in the 1770s to do away with the slave. Now, they still had slavery, but they did away with the slave trade. And the bottom line is that only a small percentage of people own slaves. Now, the people in the North are so self-righteous and so, we did have. Well, you did. You had slaves, but it wasn't very profitable.
It's funny when you read the debates, Hal, James Iredell, Madison takes notes from these debates, and James Iredell says that, when they're talking about the 3/5 clause and ending the slave trade in 1803, James Iredell remarked that he didn't think that even Connecticut or New York would go along with the Constitution if there was an immediate ban to slavery. So they need to get over their self-righteousness for sure.
That's right. Exactly right. In fact, the reason why the Amistad landed in New London, Connecticut, instead of New York is because Connecticut still had slavery, although it was just a hand. There weren't many slaves, but the bottom line, it was still being practiced. And so that's one of the classes I taught last year at camp of America's Black Patriots of the Revolution. And there's a Black Heritage Trail in Boston, and there's a meeting. There was a meeting house meant church back in those days. And it's actually the church still owns. I think they still own they don't have any services anymore. It's a historical place, but I think it's administered by the Parks Department, but it's owned by another entity. And it's like 3 different entities either run it or own it or control it or what have you. But that was a church. That was where people met, and that was where the revolution was fomented. But in my study, I learned about a black militia unit. They were called the Bucks of America.
The Bucks of America,
yep. Yes, they had a flag which is on display at the Massachusetts Historical Society, and they passed and reviewed John Hancock's house, which used to stand right next to where the State House is now. And they had the utmost respect and admiration, and they walked around Boston carrying weapons. They weren't, I don't know if they were in a lot of pitched battles, but they did a lot of the important work, guarding the prisoners and other types of jobs.
You have George Middleton, who was a Buck of America, who fought in Brandywine and Germantown. They were fighting all over. They were in the battles, that's for sure.
No, what I'm saying is that this Boston-based group specifically, but absolutely. There was at least 2 blacks at Bunker Hill, Peter Salem and Salem Poor. Peter Salem and Salem Poor. It's kind of easy to remember. Peter Salem and Salem Poor, and at Lexington. When they do the reenactment every year, there's a gentleman that plays Prince Estabrook. Prince was probably in his early 20s. And this gentleman, his name is Charlie Price. He's in his early 80s now, and I don't know how long he can get shot on the green, but he's still in pretty good shape. But Prince was a slave, but he got his freedom and he spent a lot of time fighting in New York on the Continental Army. In fact, the Continental Congress, it was forbidden for blacks to serve, but Washington. There wasn't a 10th Amendment in those days, but he figured there'd be one eventually. He just ignored it, and he enlisted blacks. They enlisted them. What are you going to? You're going to go to the watch and say you're wrong? And so, he violated the law, but it was for the right reason. And
there were provisions. There were provisions throughout the states, not all the states, but several of the states, that said if you're a slave and you want to fight for liberty, you are automatically free forever.
So that's right. Quite a few.
Yeah, so there was a big contention because the British troops were making similar claims they were telling the slaves, we will arm you to rise up against your masters, but then, telling them once we gain control, you will still be a slave. It was the American colonists that were freeing those that were fighting for liberty.
And there's the famous painting of the crossing the Delaware. There was a black. Now, I've done some research on that. His name was Prince Whipple from New Hampshire, and he was a slave, but he got his freedom. Now, they don't think that he may have actually crossed he was definitely involved in the war, but whether or not he crossed the Delaware with Washington is maybe historic license. So I like to believe that he did, but I think it indicates that the black Americans were there from the very beginning. They shed their blood, which is the same color as white Americans, and it's important to acknowledge that. And yes, we're always going to have racial issues. That's because of our sin nature. But instead of dividing the races, stuff like this should bring the races together.
Well, not only that. I mean, I think that it's very dishonorable of America today to not give these people their due. I mean, we had provisions in the state that said if you're a slave and you want to fight for liberty, you are now a free man forever. But in that, we must recognize that there are some men who gave their only free breath so that we could be free, and we don't even learn about them. I think that's very, very disgraceful. Has your study brought you to James Fortnan?
James, what's the last name?
Fortnan.
I don't think so.
Oh, look up James Fortnan. James Fortnan was 14 years old in Pennsylvania when he actually heard. He was the son of free blacks, and he actually heard the reading of the Declaration of Independence, and he ran out and joined a Navy ship. And his ship was captured by British troops, by another Navy, a British Navy, and he was brought aboard the ship. And because he was a young boy, the captain of the British ship favored him and offered Fortnan the opportunity to go back to Great Britain with him and become a companion to his son. Now, he would still be a slave, mind you, but a companion to a captain of a naval ship would be just an amazing lifestyle change for him. And he refused. He said, I'm here to fight for the liberty of my people, and I won't become a traitor to that cause. And they threw him into the prison hold, where he stayed there and for 7 months until there was a prisoner exchange and he was let free. But at 14 years old, this young black man stood for liberty.
Wow. And people his memory should be well known to people, and unfortunately it is not. Well, Miss KrisAnne, we only have 2 minutes left, so shortest 30 minutes in radio. Tell folks where they can learn about you, where you may be. Are you still traveling around the country, or are you going to be doing that? Or
yes, we are. We're having, for certain reasons, having to sort of cut back on that a little bit. But we are still traveling in a limited fashion.
Where can people learn about your ministry? Where can they go to find out more information?
At KrisAnneHall.com, KrisAnnehall.com. And I just want everybody that's listening to know that I believe this is one of the best camps in America to get the training on the Constitution and the experience, because you have brought together some really, really great people. And I tell you, I do not take it lightly, and my heart is deeply moved that Colton and I will not be there this year.
Well, you're going to be missed, and the welcome mat is always there for you and your wonderful family.
Thank you.
Well, Kris, thank you so
much.
much. God bless you, and we'll definitely stay in touch. And
all right.
Thanks for listening. Until next week. You've been listening to Camp Constitutional Radio on WBCQ The Planet. Good night and God bless.